Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports. And I would like to say that I had a little bit of R&R this weekend, but no, I spent all weekend in the trenches of the info war on Twitter, trying to combat really just all of the lies and intellectual dishonesty, the logical fallacies. I'm a believer in truth and objective reason, and it's really upsetting to me. Listen, I'm not taking positions on Israel or not. I'm just saying that the amount of retardation that I saw on my Twitter feed was really troubling because I've been on Twitter for like 16 months now. I've really not seen anything like it. And what's happening is the civil war for the future of the Republican Party is playing out right now, as it really looks like the establishment Republicans, who I thought would break over, economic populism, are really doubling down on this new Christian Zionist stuff. It's really weird where they're taking this thing, but that's not what this video is going to be about. This video is going to be about fresh, really relevant polling. We like to see a news story come out, go right into the field, get the results back, and report them when they're still really relevant. And I think this is because the topic is the autopen scandal, and I think we can all acknowledge that it's way more useful for the right to focus on this than maybe sort of discussions about leftist cancellation tactics and gatekeeping and purity testing the Republican movement. I thought we already hashed this out. It's America first. Like, get with the program, establishment Republicans. But yeah, we're going to talk about the autopen stuff. But I mean, let's just acknowledge that a lot of stuff is really happening right now. I mean, even the government is shut down. Donald Trump's out there scoring, I guess, wins internationally with the trade deals and stuff like that. But he's also calling for the Senate to use the nuclear option, and they're not doing anything. The rating of Congress is really low right now. They're getting most of the blame for the shutdown, to be honest with you. And, Republicans are completely MIA on this. And 42 million people get SNAP. And actually, some of them really kind of need it, even though I think there's a ridiculous number of people on there that probably shouldn't be. But let's also acknowledge that young people are hurting. That was like the whole point of the America First movement, was to refocus the government on helping out the middle class that has just been ubiquitously screwed over and over again by both parties. Let's not forget that Republican globalism is what caused the wage stagnation primarily. Obviously, there were other reasons like the invasion of the southern border. But let's be real. Republicans love their international slave labor. And they were arguing for amnesty the second the ink was dry on that one big beautiful bill behind the scenes. But the meme, my taxes pay for people's SNAP. They buy junk food with it. They're fat and unhealthy, and then my taxes pay for their health care. This is the American dream. And you know what? As we've talked about at length, Gen Z did not sign up for this. But, here's what's going on in the fight. Now it's like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson aren't MAGA. Like somehow Mark Levin and Ted Cruz think that they're going to be able to take over MAGA and convince everybody. It's unbelievable. Again, I was not kidding. It's like literally retardation everywhere in my stream. Did anyone in the pro-Israel camp think this talking point through before the memo even went out? Steve Bannon quite literally went to jail for being MAGA. He was also like the next man up back in 2020 with War Room. Let's not forget that. And then like the contrast presented just days after like the Tucker Carlson thing, to have all these folks go to the Republican Jewish coalition and Ted Cruz, proudly avowed Christian Zionist. Then you have Randy Fine, bombs away Randy Fine, says that Tucker Carlson is the number one threat to Jews, and he is the new Hitler. He is the new Hitler. This isn't about Nick Fuentes. It never was about Nick Fuentes. This is about wresting control of the Republican Party and the movement from MAGA and turning it into something that is not American first. Top Zionists are now calling for Carlson's neutralization, paving the way for Tucker to be eliminated. It's the Charlie Kirk playbook. Unbelievable. And, I guess this is where we're going. Like, all of a sudden, this term, Christian Zionist, is like everybody's wondering what it means because it came out of nowhere. Look at that Google search trend volume just absolutely spiking because of this one freaking event. Unbelievable. And, I also don't want to forget that the backdrop is it's like tomorrow's election day, and maybe Jack Ciattarelli is going to pull it out. I don't know. I guess Trump is dumping a lot of money into New Jersey. He was down 6 points in my polling, but that was a somewhat likely voter screen. And if you look at the very likely voter screens, the race is kind of more like almost tied, but it's all going to come down to turnout. But we have to acknowledge that Chitterelli's doing well. He's outperforming Trump in 24, but 24 was a presidential cycle. You'd expect on like a special election cycle like this year to have more of a conservative turnout. But I looked at the polling, and New Jersey doesn't really just strike me as very Republican. Democrats still have a plus 10 registration advantage. And so it's like he's a good candidate. Cheryl's a bad candidate. But if he doesn't get over the finish line, it's probably because Republicans don't really have a message for New Jersey. And they certainly don't for New York. The Republican message for New York was please, Curtis Sliwa voters, abandon your principles and vote for mass murderer Cuomo. That was the Republican message. And the answer is no. Like New York City wants Mamdani. And this is what you're going to get because the youth think the future has been stolen from them. They hate the economy. They think it's stacked against them. And a guy comes along like this who says, you know, I have the answer. It's democratic socialism. They believe it because your system didn't work for them. It failed them. I'm sorry. You sent their jobs overseas. They don't want to hear your lectures about how they don't understand history because you also failed to teach them that history. You thought instead at school they should probably be learning like gay stuff. And so this race is tightening a little bit. Atlas has Mamdani only up 7, but I mean, I just have not seen a single poll that shows this guy losing. Something awfully miraculous would have to happen in order for him to lose New York. And guess what? Then he gets elected and you can't do anything. I guess the Trump administration can maybe shut down federal funding or whatever. I don't know. But like this is where things are going unless the Republican Party ups their effort level and leans into burn it down politics like I've been calling for. Now, what does that mean? Does that literally mean burn the country down? No. But I'm going to give you a very specific example with this autopen scandal about what I'm talking about. And so here's the situation if you haven't been paying attention. The House GOP concludes its investigation into Biden's alleged mental decline. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee is recommending a DOJ probe whether Biden executive orders should be overturned. The House GOP's much ballyhooed investigation into former President Joe Biden's alleged cognitive decline has largely ended with a thud. Okay, Politico, thanks for telling us that. In a new report released Tuesday morning, the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee's Republican majority claims to have found evidence that senior Biden White House aides exercised the authority of the former president and concealed signs of Joe Biden's mental deterioration. In fact, the probe concluded with the need for answers to more questions than any appearance of a smoking gun. Wait, hold on. This is interesting. So Politico is out here trying to do damage control. That the report found nothing about Joe Biden's mental decline, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the autopen investigation that the Oversight Committee has been doing. James Comer has been talking a lot about it. In fact, he made some pretty bold claims last week. We'll take a look at them. But how far down do we have to scroll? Oh, here it is. Comer took on the charge of putting together a review of the former president's use of the autopen. Trump separately launched the administration's own probe into whether Biden's former White House aides contributed to a cover-up of his decline and authorized illicit use of the autopen. With the exception of the rigged presidential election of 2020, the autopen is the biggest political scandal in American history, Trump posted on Truth Social this summer. The Justice Department declined to comment, but Pam Bondi said in a social media post Tuesday morning that her team was, quote, reviewing the Biden administration's reported use of autopen for pardons, and thanked James Comer for his great work on this. But you know, it's a really big deal. GOP oversight has exposed the Biden autopen presidency, revealing how top aides misled Americans and worked to maintain the illusion of presidential control as Biden's capacity declined. Executive actions taken by the White House, Biden staff, and signed by autopen are null and void. That would be pretty wild, kind of like a constitutional crisis. Look at these words. Biden was not running the show. Our new report exposes how his decline was real and his aides covered it up. Terrific work by the GOP oversight. The ball is squarely in AG Pam Bondi's court. If the greatest scandal in American history goes without any accountability, then we are in a worse position than we started. Yep, 100% agree. James Comer says the U.S. Department of Justice should immediately conduct a thorough review of these Biden autopen executive actions and scrutinize key Biden aides who took the fifth before Congress to hide their participation in the cover-ups. He even came out and said basically that they gave this to the DOJ on a silver platter. begging Pam Bondi to do her job. Eyes are on the DOJ right now. America is watching because they wanted accountability, and in my opinion, they haven't gotten it yet. But here's the new polling. Almost 1,200 U.S. likely voters conducted just October 28th through the 30th. Many pardons and executive orders issued under President Biden were signed by a machine called an autopen. How likely is it that when Joe Biden was president, members of his White House staff used the autopen to sign documents without Joe Biden's knowledge or approval? And a majority think it's likely. 40% very likely, 15% somewhat likely, 55% only 33% say not likely, only 18% say not at all likely. So yeah, that's really big. That's over 20 points. America's like, yeah, this happened. This happened. Only 12% of people are not sure. And it's because people were watching with their eyes wide open. Remember, 68% of Americans thought that Joe Biden needed to take a mental test because of cognitive decline. And what's wild here too is that 18 to 29-year-olds who are most on the internet by age of these people, they're pretty likely to say, yeah, 60% say it's at least somewhat likely. And that is just as high, if not higher, than pretty much everybody else. Higher than everybody else but the 40 to 49s. They win by like 1 point here. And, it's majorities of every race except black voters, and even 44% of black voters say likely. And even 38% of Democrats say likely. Only 45% of Democrats say not likely. And, they probably have less scruples about it, but I'm sure still some of them are kind of upset. 79% of Republicans say likely, 62% very, only 15% say not likely. And independents say likely, 49% to 38%. So pretty much everybody's like, yeah, it probably happened. I saw him falling downstairs. I saw him being led around by the Easter Bunny. Yeah, that dude probably wasn't signing laws and executive orders. Like, this is probably what happened. And there's always been a lot of speculation about Biden. Half of America wanted Biden impeached. A very strong majority thought that he was profiting from deals with overseas countries like China. And, they basically knew he was weaponizing justice. Like, this is the reason that Donald Trump is in office, because of the way in which the government was corrupted. Now, obviously, it was corrupted a lot before Biden even got there. But that's why only 30% of the country trusts the federal government. It was a referendum on institutional trust, as I've said a million times, and I'll continue to say. A congressional investigation recently concluded that as President Biden's mental and physical condition deteriorated, his aides exercised presidential authority and facilitated executive actions without his direct authorization, including misusing the autopen and failing to properly document decision-making processes. Kind of makes you wonder where the nuclear football was. Anyways, should aides to President Biden be criminally prosecuted for unauthorized actions during his administration? And a majority of Americans, US likely voters, want to see these people in jail, 52% to 32%. Now, it's not as big of a signal as when we said that, if people manipulated intelligence in order to get Trump with Russia collusion, should those people be in jail? And it was closer to like 60%, but this is still a really, really big majority, 52 to 32. And remember, there's an aspect of like Joe Biden is basically mentally cooked at this point, and he's got like stage 4 prostate cancer. There's probably little to be gained by throwing him in jail. But men say, yeah, 58% to 30. And even women say yes by a plurality, 46 to 34. But back to the age signal, 18 to 29-year-olds are most likely to say yes. 59% of them, only 19% say no. Arrests are plus 40. Should aides to President Biden be criminally prosecuted for unauthorized actions during his administration? The Zoomers do not like a corrupt government. They think their future was stolen. We've gone into this at length. They think the economy is unfair. They think housing prices is at crisis levels. Their dating pictures messed up. They're all on psychotropic drugs. Like, this is a major problem. They are not happy with the world they've been handed, and they don't want to hear boomers say, suck it up. They don't share the same values. They're going to create a different country, and the Republican Party is going to be left in the dust if they can't figure out how to appeal to these people. 59% want arrests. And it's like only 44% is 65 and older. 43% say no. Unbelievable. By party, 36% of Democrats say yes, less than half of them say no. And Republicans, 75% say yes, 14% say no. And independents want these aides arrested 44% to 35% plus 9, even though among independents, Donald Trump's approval right now is like underwater, almost 30 points. And that brings me to another very, very important point. Here's the updated approval chart. And Donald Trump, again, he's not doing as bad as he was in first term because of Russia collusion. He's not doing as bad as Joe Biden was after the Afghan crisis, but he's lost his advantage on Barack Obama, and his numbers have kind of plunged. They haven't plunged as much as they did the last time he had a massive government shutdown, but his net approval is at -8 today, and that is the lowest of his second term. And it will probably come back up, but you have to look around and say, you know what? He's not really winning. Yes, he's had some wins, but he's not really winning. People are upset at Congress. They think Congress isn't doing their job. Congress only gets like 12% excellent right now. It gets 58% poor. And even 41% of Republicans give Congress a poor rating, only 13% excellent. And it is a Republican Congress. And so we haven't really seen arrests. The government's shut down. We haven't really had laws. We haven't really had cutting. We haven't really had this idea of Doge going in and just ripping things out root and stem. And so I don't think it's been enough winning. And the Republicans have not been involved in it. I guess we will find out tomorrow in these special elections if Republicans are able to convert Trump voters. But here is a conclusion about my point on Generation Z. Remember, the 18 to 29s were most likely to want the Biden aides arrested, 59% to only 19%. But now look at Trump approval by age. 46% Trump approve, only 33% strong approve, but the 18 to 29s are at 35%. Only 35%. And the 30 to 39s now are down to 45%. This group of people together was at 60% back in February. They've gone from 60% to what would roughly be 40%, a 20-point drop in total approval. The net approval obviously changes way, way, way bigger. The least approving, the most craving of arrests, the least approving of Donald Trump. There is a message in there for you, Republican Party. And look at independents, 35% independent approval, 62% disapproval. So Donald Trump is underwater almost 40 points with independents. He started the year at like underwater 5 points with them. So he's lost massively with independents who are usually more minority and younger and politically homeless. And they haven't found a home in the Republican Party. I'm sorry. That's just fact. And 18 to 29-year-olds were also super optimistic about the direction of the country. The 18 to 40s were the highest right direction numbers back in February. Now they're the lowest. Look at that, 37% on average. They went from the highest to the lowest. What changed? They lost faith in the Trump administration. What changed? Maybe it's that they're not getting arrests. I've showed this quite a few times now. This is my message for the Republican Party. This is the new politics. You don't have to worry about Israel. You don't have to worry about Nick Fuentes. You can just ignore that stuff and focus on this core set of principles. It's not traditional conservatism. It's not libertarianism. It's not even authoritarian statism. It's basically justice. Plot a scale of grift tolerance and authority trust, and the humans who can tolerate no more grift, no more theft, no more corruption, and the people who trust none of the people in authority because they've been failed over and over again are in the green square, the burn the system down square, proverbially. They don't really care. Like when you say, hey, I'm going to close down the FBI and make it a museum to the deep state, these people will cheer. When you go after, Biden staffers and throw them in jail for misusing the power of the presidency, these people will cheer. When you go and bust up monopolies, when you afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, these people will cheer. The problem is time and time again, I see clues every day that Republican elected leaders are in the blue square. Long live the system. The grift isn't really affecting them. In fact, they're profiting. And if people in their movement grift, they can't really call them out. They need a unified front, don't you know? And yeah, they trust the authority because they are the authority right now. It's like the tone completely changed when they were put in charge of institutions that Americans still think are corrupt. There needs to be visceral accountability. People need a gut punch. You can't just tell them how bad things are. You have to also fix it. And I don't know what else to say. If you don't, they're going to become communists. I mean, like, that's literally the freaking future. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but traditional conservatism is dead. Your granddaddy's a Republican. Mitt Romney will never win another election in this country. And I don't care how bad the candidates are that they run. They're going to get 70, 75 million voters. If you run Mitt Romney now, you're going to get 55, maybe 60 max. I just don't see people piling in behind him. Remember, 42% of Trump's support in our polling in November of 2024 was from people who are not Republicans. That's just the reality. That's just the future. It doesn't matter how many times you try to explain history to them. It doesn't matter how many times you try to like co-opt the narrative into convincing them to support something that's not in their best interest. They will use the internet and they will see through your lies. I mean, seriously, look, you do not see a lot of horror and shock that people are learning that the autopen was misused. It's like everybody knew it. So, like, what are we doing here? We are all sitting around. We all know it. When are things going to change? Geez, I talk about the election as a referendum on the federal government because only 30% trust the federal government. And you know how these signals work. The farther apart the two responses are, the bigger a signal it is. Well, here's one I don't talk about very often, but from the fall, when you think about the next president and how they will govern the country, which is closer to your opinion? That things should return to business as usual in Washington, D.C., or that Washington, D.C. is in need of a major change? Business as usual, 20%. Major change, 75%. And this is people that like voted for Biden, a lot of them, and were looking at Kamala Harris, and even they wanted Kamala Harris to go in and majorly shake things up. Only 33% of Democrats said business as usual. Republicans, it was 10% business as usual to 88% major change. Have we seen major change? But guess what? The 18 to 29s, the 30 to 39s, right there with them. With a massive signal, especially the 30 to 39, 17% business as usual, 80% major change. So Republican Party, guess what? You're not getting out of this without major change. And we haven't seen it yet. And quite frankly, it looks like you're throwing temper tantrums to prove to the right that you're not willing to undergo a major change. Not a good look. If you've learned something, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Follow us on X at Rasmussen_poll and myself at Honest Pollster. You can watch our videos on YouTube at Rasmussen_poll and Rasmussen_rewind and on Rumble at Rasmussen Reports. We stream multiple times a week on Twitter, Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, and Getter. Thanks for watching.